Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Milifortic S093. This watch is available from miliforticwatch.com for €163. So firstly, let's look at the case that the watch comes in, and then I'll talk you through the specifications of the piece. So the watch comes in this Milifortic branded hardshell travel case. It has a zip securing the lid, so I'll show you the interior. In the underside of the lid we have an elasticated web pocket which houses the items I'll show you, and in the base we have two foam panels. The top panel sits on top of the watch and that protects it in shipping from any damage. There's also this strip of PU leather or vinyl, and that goes in between the case back and also the bracelet clasp, and it prevents the clasp from rubbing against the case back when the watch is in transit and scuffing and scratching it, so good attention to detail. We also have this second piece of protective foam, and that does a good job of protecting the watch in shipping from any damage. So good quality hardshell travel case, and Milifortic deserve credit here because they could have used the less expensive default option of a plastic or cardboard watch box. Bearing in mind this is a low tier price point piece at €163, but this hardshell travel case is good quality and aesthetically pleasing. So with regards to the items, one gets this Milifortic branded microfiber polishing cloth. I always think it's a nice touch to get a branded microfiber polishing cloth irrespective of the price point of a piece. And one also gets this spring bar tool, two rubber caps. At one end we have a push pin, and at the other end we have a fine two-prong fork. And this does suffice if you want to remove the bracelet from the head of the piece and fit an alternative strap, so nice to get that included. And lastly, one also gets this Milifortic branded warranty card. On the reverse it's filled in with the date of purchase, reference number of the piece, and there's space to fill in a stamp or signature from the dealer. And as you can see, this was supplied by miliforticwatch.com. Now I want to give due credit to Milifortic here because often low tier Chinese brands only cover their watches with 12 months warranty. To get 2 years of warranty is good, and it is exceptional at this price point of €163 in the low tier, and they deserve full credit for that. So the only thing that's missing is an owner's instruction manual, and I would like to see Milifortic incorporate that. An owner's instruction manual in the form of a booklet, or alternatively a card with a QR code that could be scanned with an iPhone or Android to download the owner's instruction manual detailing the operation of the movement used, which is the Seiko Caliber NH38A automatic. So with regards to the specifications of the piece, the Milifortic S093 is clearly an homage to the Rolex Explorer 36, a watch I have previously reviewed on my channel. So very similar proportions to the Rolex Explorer 36. We have a 36mm case diameter. We have a lug-to-lug measurement of 43.5mm, a thickness of 11.6mm, and a lug width of 20mm. The oyster style bracelet tapers from 20mm at the lugs down to 16mm at the 2-button push clasp. Now I'm going to be critical of the 2-button push clasp because it is sterile and unsigned. I would like to see Milifortic engrave an M for Milifortic as a brand emblem, or alternatively the Milifortic text logo in cursive font that they use on their hardshell travel case and the dial, because that would further enhance the piece. It is a clear cost cutting measure in order to reduce production costs and therefore maximise profit margin per piece. One can be magnanimous about sterile clasps at the below €100 price point in the low tier, but this is €163 and the industry standard is to have a signed clasp. With regards to the crystal, it's a flat sapphire crystal with clear AR coating on the underside, and the clear anti-reflective coating does an outstanding job of reducing the glare and the highly reflective nature of the silver mirror polished applied indices and silver mirror polished Arabic numerals at 9, 6 and 3, and also the silver mirror polished Mercedes handset. So in terms of the proportions of the indices and the Arabic numerals which are applied, they do look very similar in proportion to the Rolex Explorer 36, which this is an homage to. The dial is good. I like that they haven't over-branded it with unnecessary text or specification. We simply have the Milifortic text logo at 12 o'clock, which is aesthetically pleasing. And at 6 o'clock, we simply have automatic and 100 meters equals 330 feet. So just the right amount of information. Does look similar to the Explorer 36 dial layout in terms of the proportions of the Mercedes hands and also the indices and Arabic numerals. The white minute ticks on the chapter ring contrasts very well with the glossy black enamel dial, and the glossy enamel dial is very well executed. It's very aesthetically pleasing, and it does look very similar to a Rolex Explorer 36, which this is an homage to. The one detail I like about this piece, and it's something that's different to the Explorer 36, is the Explorer 36 has male end links, but this piece, the S093, has female pivoted end links. And I think Milifortic have made the correct decision, and they deserve credit for this rather than using male end links, because the female pivoted end links articulate, and this means the piece is particularly suitable for collectors with a smaller wrist size of 6 to 7 inches, because they will get a nice snug fit with the end link of the oyster style bracelet articulating beneath the tips of the lugs. The bezel is solid 316L grade stainless steel, flawless mirror polishing to it, and it's low profile. I like that the flat sapphire crystal has a bevel which projects above the mirror polished bezel, because it gives it a nice eye-catching, light-catching feature to it. As you can see, when you tilt the piece at an oblique angle, you can see the bevel on the edge of the sapphire crystal catches the light, so it's very good looking. The finishing to the head of the piece is excellent. Flawless brush satin finishing to the tops of the lugs. Nice fine grained finish. Nice crisp edge which marks the transition between the tops of the lugs and the flanks are mirror polished to a flawless standard. No sharp undercut to the flanks of the case, and also on the crown guard side the undercuts to the flanks have been deburred and chamfered very well. Four corners to the tips of the lugs have also been deburred and chamfered very well. So the quality of the finishing to the head of the piece, the bezel, is excellent. With regards to the crown, it's solid 316L grade stainless steel, coin edge finished. Nice large chamfer to the tips of the teeth, which deletes the sharp tips of the coin edge teeth. Mirror polished domed cap. Now I'm going to be critical of this because, again, this is another cost cutting measure to reduce production costs. It's sterile, it's an unsigned crown. Again, one could be magnanimous about this below €100 in the low tier. This is €163, and therefore one expects an embossed or engraved signed crown. For example, if you look at the Milifortic font, which is like cursive text on the dial, I think they could engrave the M for Milifortic or emboss it on the crown, and that would make it more aesthetically pleasing and also better match the price point of €163. So I dislike seeing a sterile crown at this price point, although it is very well finished. The mirror polishing is very good and the chamfer is very well done. Also, the coin edge teeth are grippy and tactile, and the crown is correctly proportioned. It's not too large, but it is large enough to get good purchase with one's index finger and thumb. So let's test the screw down crown execution. So 100 meters of hermetic seal is strong specification. Feels silky smooth. Perfect interface between the internal thread of the stainless steel crown and the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube. They could have used a push-pull crown as a cost-cutting measure. Screw-down crown is good, as per the Rolex Explorer 36, which this is an homage to. 100 meters is strong specification. Again, they could have used a 50-meter water resistance, so 100 with a screw-down crown is good. Minimal number of turns required to fully unscrew it. Now, the thing I like about this piece is it uses the NH38A, which is the no-date version of the NH35A, and therefore there is no phantom date setting position. There's simply one click position on the crown, and that's very good. I'm pleased to see they didn't use the NH35A with the date wheel present beneath the dial. So, when it's unscrewed, we're now in the manual wind position, and one can manually wind the Seiko caliber NH38A to its maximum 41-hour power reserve. Feels nice and smooth to manually wind. One can feel the tension in the mainspring gradually building up to its maximum 41 hours. Nice firm resistance to it. One can feel the gearing, good meshing in the gearing, and I like the feeling of manually winding the NH38A. Feels exactly the same as the 35A. There's no discernible difference when manually winding. So pulling it out to the first click position is the final click. As I've detailed, there's no phantom date setting position, and that hacks the movement. If you look at the second hand, you can see it's now stopped dead, so it's possible to set the time precisely to the second with the caliber NH38A. Nice light resistance to the gearing, both clockwise and anti-clockwise. Feels nice and smooth, cycling through the 12 hours in both directions. And I like it. There's a good meshing with the gearing. And again, there's no discernible difference between the NH35A, which is the date version, and the 38A, which is used in this piece. Pushing it back in, it's got a nice positive click, and that restarts the movement. You can see the second hand begins to sweep around the dial once again at the characteristic 3 Hz sweep. Now, subjectively, one could be critical of this because the negative of the NH38A and also the 35A respectively is they run at 21,600 vibrations per hour and a frequency of 3 Hz. 3 Hz movements give a stutter or judder to the second hand sweep rather than a smoother sweep to the 4 Hz used in pieces that run at 28,800 vibrations per hour. But however, this is subjective. For the majority of collectors, they don't mind the stutter or judder of a 3 Hz sweep on the second hand. Let's test screwing the crown back down. instant thread pickup. This is perfect interface between the internal thread of the stainless steel crown and the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube. So, quality control, builds quality, tolerances and machining are outstanding. This is a silky smooth screw down crown, sublime screw down crown execution. Milifortic deserve credit, it's very pleasant to use. So, manual winding works well, hacking works well, time setting works well, and no phantom date setting position is a positive. So let's look at the bracelet and end links in detail. So as I've detailed, the difference between this and the Rolex Explorer 36, which it is an homage to, is the Explorer 36 uses male end links, but this S093 uses female pivoted end links, and they've made the correct decision. Articulates freely, doesn't feel stiff or kink, doesn't have excessive longitudinal, lateral, side to side or up and down play, so the tolerances are good. Let's check the other side for continuity. Again, female pivoted end links articulate freely, doesn't feel stiff or kink, which is good, and doesn't have excessive longitudinal, lateral, side to side or up and down play, so tolerances are good. Quality of the finishing to the oyster style bracelet is excellent, and they deserve credit for this. Nice fine grained longitudinal satin finishing to the top side and underside of the oyster style bracelet, beautiful luster to it on both the 6 o'clock and the 12 o'clock side. The oyster style links articulate freely, they don't feel stiff or kink, which is good. Bracelet doesn't rattle, it's not a sloppy bracelet, the tolerances are nice and tight, and I'm pleased to see screw pins used rather than the cost cutting measure of push pins at this price point. Quality of the finishing is good, beautiful luster to the brushed satin finishing, but that contrasts with the flawless mirror polishing to the flanks. No sharp edge to the top edge or the lower edge of the flanks, so this is a very well finished bracelet. Doesn't have sharp edges, so it doesn't feel sharp against the wrist, doesn't feel rough or scratch, doesn't pull arm hairs, isn't sloppy, both sides feel nice and tight, doesn't have excessive play, and I like to see the screw pins used. So the articulation is good on both sides, and I like that it feels very smooth. No sharp edges to the flanks, and also articulates very well. This is a good quality oyster style bracelet. The other thing I like about it, and I often refer to this in my previous reviews, it has the Perfection Personified taper, the industry standard 20 to 16, and it's the industry standard for good reason. It looks aesthetically pleasing, but it also reduces the meat, the weight of the bracelet, and therefore the heft of this piece is only 133 grams. Anything below 150 grams is the sweet spot for comfort level for all wrist sizes, so you can wear this piece for long periods of time, such as 8 to 12 hours per day. 36mm head of the piece should have a 20 to 16. They deserve credit for making the bracelet taper correct. So let's look at the clasp. Solid Mil 316L grade stainless steel clasp. As I've detailed, the cross-cutting measure, the negative is it's unsigned, it's sterile. I would like to see an M for Milifortic, emblem engraved, or alternatively the Milifortic cursive logo. That would enhance the piece. But in terms of finishing, nice heavy gauge to the 316L grade stainless steel. Beautiful luster to the brushed satin finishing to the body, and that complements the brushed satin finishing to the flanks. I'd like to see them enlarge the clasp so that they could drill an additional 1 or 2 holes, because 3 is the minimum. It only gives 1 link of micro adjustment, and bear in mind this doesn't have a ratcheting mechanism or micro adjustment. We only have 3 holes in the flanks. That's the bare minimum. So I'd like to see them lengthen the clasp, and that would allow them to drill an additional 1 or 2 holes to have 4 or 5 micro adjustment holes. The other thing they could do to enhance this piece is add half links, one on the 6 o'clock side, one on the 12 o'clock side of the oyster style bracelet, because the oyster style bracelet only has full links. The problem with that is, in the absence of a micro adjustment clasp, sometimes adding or subtracting 1 full link from an oyster style bracelet does not give the perfect fit. It's slightly too tight or slightly too loose for collectors, regardless of whether you have a 6 to 7 inch wrist or a 7 to 8 inch wrist respectively. If they added half links either side of the clasp, that would get the perfect fit. The other benefit is it would centralise the clasp, because again, with the absence of half links and a short clasp like this, sometimes when you remove 1 or 1 or 2 links from the 6 or the 12 o'clock side, that makes the clasp sit off centre. It sits too far to the left or the right on wrist, too far to the 6 or too far to the 12 o'clock side respectively. So by having half links, you can centralise the clasp. For example, you can remove 1.5 links from either side, and that keeps the clasp bang on the centre of the wrist. So they really should consider adding a longer clasp with an additional 1 or 2 holes, and also half links in the oyster style bracelet. 2 button push triggers are mirror polished to a good standard, and it opens freely. Solid Mil 316L grade stainless steel interior, doesn't have sharp edges to the centre section, which is good. The corners have been deburred and chamfered well. No sharp edges to the top edge or the lower edge of the flanks. Flawless brush satin finishing, beautiful lustre to it on the top side, underside and flanks. One detail I like, and they deserve credit for this, and one doesn't often see this on low tier Chinese brands. If you look at the underside to the right hand portion, you can see they've mirror polished this large bevel. And this is beneficial because they've mirror polished this large bevel, which is machined, and that deletes the sharp edge. Often you get a sharp edge on the right hand portion on the underside of a mil clasp, but this large mirror polished bevel fully deletes it, feels very smooth and comfortable against the wrist. And they've done a very good job of the mirror polishing on both the top side and the underside of the right hand portion, as you can see. It does enhance the comfort level and the feel good factor of this piece. So the mil clasp is very well executed. Now let's check the hinge pins. Left hand hinge pin articulates freely, doesn't feel stiff or kink, doesn't have excessive longitudinal, lateral, side to side or up and down play. Good tolerances. Let's check the centre hinge pin. Again, articulates freely, doesn't feel stiff or kink, doesn't have excessive longitudinal, lateral, side to side or up and down play. Finally, let's check the right hand hinge pin. Again, nice tight tolerances, doesn't have excessive play in any direction, articulates freely, doesn't feel stiff or kink. This is an example to other low tier Chinese brands of how to get solid mil 316L grade stainless steel clasp finishing, build quality, quality control and tolerances correct. 3 tight hinge pins, left, centre and right. This is correct. So they just need to sign it with a Milifortic text logo or emblem, and also lengthen it to allow for 1 or 2 extra holes. But no sharp edges to the top edge or the low edge, doesn't have sharp corners, the 4 corners are deburred and chamfered, doesn't have a sharp undercut to the flanks. So it's a very well finished clasp and beautiful lustre to it. It's just a shame it's sterile. Let's look at the case back. Solid 316L grade stainless steel case back, sterile as per the Rolex Explorer 36 case back, concentric CNC lathe tool machining to it, and it's very well finished. I like the way the concentric CNC lathe tool machining refracts the light rather than reflecting it, and the circumference has coin edge finishing. The tips of the coin edge teeth are deburred very well, don't have sharp tips to the teeth, which is good. So it's a bubble back case back, and that is to be expected because the NH38A, like the 35A, is a thick movement and therefore it requires additional clearance for the rotor, and one has to expect a bubble back case back, but it's not too thick even though it's 100 meters water resistant. This is only 11.6mm thick. The female pivoted end links are well finished, no sharp edges to them. They're deburred and chamfered very well, good snug fits to the head of the piece. The underside to the head of the piece has concentric CNC lathe tool machining, nice large chamfers to the undercuts to the flanks, and the 4 tips to the corners of the lugs are deburred and chamfered very well. So although the case back is bubble back profile, it does feel very smooth because it's sterile, and the concentric CNC lathe tool machining to it means it's very flat and smooth in the centre, and it does look visually very similar to a Rolex Explorer 36 screw down stainless steel case back. So comfortable to wear for long periods of time, such as 8 to 12 hours per day. So I'll give you a wrist shot and you can see how it fits on my 8-inch wrist. Now, I haven't sized the bracelet, and I'm pleased to report that this oyster style bracelet is long enough to fit even a 9-inch wrist. As you can see, even with my large 8-inch wrist, I can easily slide 2 fingers beneath the bracelet and clasp at all times. So plenty of links on the 6 o'clock side, plenty of links on the 12 o'clock side to fit even a 9-inch wrist. So the minimum it will support is a 6-inch wrist. There are enough removable links to size it down to a minimum 6 up to a maximum 9-inch wrist, and that is on the maximum 3 position on the 3 holes in the micro adjustments. So wrist presence is small. That's something to bear in mind. Clearly this is intended for collectors with a smaller wrist size of 6 to 7 inches because it's a 36, and I would say to you, if you have a larger wrist of 7 to 8 inches, you may think that this is undersized and therefore doesn't wear with enough wrist presence. But however, if you are a collector with a smaller wrist of 6 to 7 inches, you will enjoy the proportions because it's a compact case like the Rolex Explorer 36, which it is an homage to. 36mm head of the piece, and it's got a short lug to lug measurement of only 43.5, so particularly suitable for a small 6 to 7 inch wrist. The taper, as I've detailed, is perfection personified. 20 to 16 is the perfect taper, reduces the heft of the piece down to only 133. Now, the thing I like about this piece above all else is the thickness. I would expect this to be circa 13mm because it is NH38A powered, but with a flat sapphire crystal this is only 11.6, so needless to say this will easily slip underneath a shirt cuff if you wear business shirts. 11.6 is very low profile even though it's 100 meters, so it does have a bubble back case back that does give some gap beneath the undercut to the flanks. That's something to bear in mind. The bubble back profile of the caseback does make the head of the piece sit slightly tall on the wrist, but due to the flat sapphire crystal versus a double dome sapphire crystal or boxed top hat profile, that would add 2mm of thickness. As you can see, it's only 11.6, so it's a very flat and low profile piece despite the bubble back caseback adding some thickness. The female pitted end links are excellent because they allow the end link in the oyster style bracelet to articulate and it pulls snug to the wrist. You can see there's a minimal gap beneath the end link in the oyster style bracelet, so they've made the correct decision by not using male end links as per the Rolex Explorer 36. I like the glossy black enamel dial and the contrast of the silver mirror polished Arabic numerals and applied indices does look visually very similar to the Rolex Explorer 36. Proportions are good, but they're clearly best suited to collectors with a 6 to 7 inch wrist, particularly the short lug to lug measurement. That's something I want you to be aware of. 48mm is the sweet spot. I often refer to it as the perfect lug to lug measurement because it fits all collectors, regardless of whether you have a 6 to 7 inch wrist or a 7 to 8 inch wrist respectively. 48 is the perfect lug to lug. At 43.5 it's a very short lug to lug and clearly best suited to collectors with a 6 to 7 inch wrist. If you have a 7 to 8 inch wrist, you'll find the 43.5 lug to lug to be too compact, so that's something to bear in mind. I'd like to see Milifortic offer this piece in a 39mm version to suit collectors with a larger 7 to 8 inch plus wrist, but if you have a smaller wrist of 6 to 7 inches, you will definitely prefer the 36 case by 43.5. So feel good factor is good, comfort level is good, and because it's only 133 grams with all the links in a very long bracelet, it's very comfortable. Anything below 150 is comfortable to wear for long periods of time, such as 8 to 12 hours per day. Right, so let's do a lume test and we'll see how the lume performs when it's charged up to the absolute maximum. So as always, I'm going to use my 100 UV LED torch to charge it up to the absolute peak. Right, so that's now fully charged. Now, initially it looks good, but unfortunately this is disappointing. We're clearly looking at 3 to 4 layers of BGW9 versus 5 to 6. Now, it's disappointing to see this cost-cutting measure at this price point. One could be magnanimous about 3 to 4 layers of BGW9 Superlume Nova in the low tier below €100 price point. But this is €163 in the low tier. It's significantly above the €100 price point and therefore one cannot be magnanimous. Now you can see the problem. The applied indices and also the applied Arabic numerals 9, 6 and 3 as well as the Mercedes handsets have a good colour tone match. In daylights the BGW9 is a perfect white tone, it doesn't look more cream on the dial or the hands, so it's white in daylights, which is good. The colour tone match is good. In the dark you can see also the colour tone match is good. It's the same blue tone of BGW9 both on the dial and the handset, so they've got the colour tone match correct. But however, you can clearly see this is 3 to 4 layers of performance versus the industry standard, the optimum 5 to 6 layers. It's now beginning to fade quickly on the dial and also on the handset. It's fading equally, so that indicates there's the same number of layers applied to the dial and also the hands. We're looking at 3 to 4 layers on the applied indices, the applied Arabic numerals and also the Mercedes handset. And it's now quickly fading, which is disappointing at €163. This is a cost-cutting measure too far. Now one has to be realistic and expect some cost-cutting measures at €163, but however, it's wholly unacceptable to see 3 to 4 layers on a piece costing €163. 5 to 6 is the industry standard. It is to be expected. So you can see now the problem. It's fading rapidly and it will continue to fade exponentially with time to nothing. So disappointing. I was expecting 5 to 6 layers and this is only 3 to 4. It's the one main negative of this piece I want you to be aware of. Right, so let's discuss the movement used because it's one of my favourite aspects of the piece. So, as I've detailed, this is powered by the NH38A, which is the no-date version of the NH35A, which you'll all be familiar with. Seiko make the NH38A in two plants in in Japan and Malaysia, and they're both made to the same build quality, materials, quality control and tolerances and accuracy. So, Milifortic watches are made by Baltony. They are the sister brand to Baltony, and they are using the same NH38s in their Baltony watches and also their Milifortic watches, which are made in Malaysia versus Japan. The NH38A has been in use since 2011, so at this stage in 2025 it's a reliable, well-proven workhorse movement. The architecture of the NH38A is the same as the NH35A respectively. The only difference is they delete the date wheel and date complication, but other than that the architecture of both the 35A and 38A are the same. The only difference is this deletes the phantom date setting position. Has 24 joules. It runs at 21,600 vibrations per hour and a frequency of 3 Hz. It has hand winding and hacking, which use all complications, and as I've demonstrated, they both work well. There is no phantom date setting position, which is a benefit of using the 38A versus the 35A. 41-hour power reserve is perfectly acceptable. The stated accuracy of the NH38A is -20 to +40 seconds per day, so rather wide accuracy range. However, I'm pleased to report that Baltony, the manufacturer of Milifortic, the sister brand, are well regulating the NH38As they're using. This one is running consistently at +6 seconds per day. +6 is well within the stated accuracy of -20 to +40, and it's actually within chronometer grade accuracy of -4 to +6. So +6 from an NH38 is excellent, and it clearly indicates they're regulating their movements in 5 positions to attain +6 from an NH38. So no negatives to it whatsoever. It's a reliable, well-proven workhorse movement, made in Malaysia, in service since 2011. The reliability is unquestionably well proven, and I like that this is the 38 versus the 35 because it deletes the phantom date setting position, and it works very well. Feels good to manually wind, hacking works well, setting the time feels smooth, and it's the correct choice at this price point to use an NH38 for a no date complication piece. So I like everything about it. It's one of my favourite movements. So last I'll summarise the piece. What do I think of it overall? Well, when I'm considering reviewing a watch on my channel, the watch meets 2 criteria. It should be both excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price point. So low tier piece, the price point is €163. I'm going to declare it good quality and good value at €163, but unfortunately I can't declare it excellent quality and excellent value at €163 because of the cost-cutting measures. The main cost-cutting measure, the main negative of this piece, as I've demonstrated, is the loom test. 3 to 4 layers of BGW9 is wholly unacceptable at €163. If this were below €100, one could be magnanimous about it. One has to be realistic and expect some cost-cutting measures. Not at €163. It has to be 5 to 6 layers of BGW9. That is just the industry standard at €163. So loom is disappointing. They need to add an additional 1 to 2 layers to bring it up to 5 to 6 layers. That would increase the performance. Also, there are 2 main cost-cutting measures which are a step too far. The sterile crown needs to be signed with an M, either engraved or embossed with an M, and that would make it better. Also, the sterile clasp is a cost-cutting measure too far. It needs to be engraved with M for Milifortic as an emblem, alternatively the Milifortic cursive logo. That would further enhance it. So in order to make this excellent quality and excellent value, they need to update it with a V2. Simply sign the crown, sign the clasp, and then 5 to 6 layers of BGW9. If they do that with a V2, I would upgrade it from good value and good quality to excellent quality and excellent value. So it's a good piece and I like it. The build quality, quality control and materials are all very good. Specification is good, but just disappointing loom and disappointing sterile crown and sterile clasp at the €163 price point. So I hope you've enjoyed my review of the Milifortic S093. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you for watching.